And that's why we take care not to rush to judgment. Not about the motivations of these individuals, certainly not about entire groups of people.
That was from Friday night at the White House. How is the administration handling the Boston bombings now? How are they reacting to it? Some of the administration in the early hours of this suggesting there was no connection to a larger organization. That may or may not be the case, but we do not know that yet. There has been some caution in cases like the Times Square bombing, even Benghazi of last September. Stephen Hayes, senior writer, Weekly Standard, Fox News contributor, Fox News national security analyst, KT McFarland, both with me now to talk about this. Good morning to both of you. And Stephen, I want to start with you. You wrote a very eloquent piece about this, and I just draw it out a little bit right now about how you see the response. Is it good? Is it accurate? Is it measured? Is it too cautious?
Well, it's early. I don't have any problem with the President of the United States saying we shouldn't rush to judgment. Of course we shouldn't rush to judgment. But I think at the same time, he needs to make sure that his team and the national security infrastructure that we have in place in the United States doesn't also avoid coming to conclusions that are presenting themselves to us. And I think, just as you suggested, we've seen that in the past. We saw that first with the Christmas Day bomber back in 2009, where we had evidence very early that he had been involved with al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, and the administration suggested that he was instead an isolated extremist. We saw it in Times Square. We saw it with Benghazi. We can't afford to repeat those kinds of mistakes. We need to be open to anything and everything, and the investigation is at its early stages. We should be looking at everything right now.
Let me come back to that. KT, you're a little stronger in your language today. You say the administration's been watching too many Harry Potter movies.
Yeah, remember,
what's up with that?
Well, the Harry Potter movies, they would never name the evil Lord Voldemort. They thought if they named him, that it would give him power, when in fact he was out for world domination and wanted to kill them all. Well, in this case, by not naming this, by not calling it Islamic extremism, by not calling them jihadists, by not calling them terrorists, what have you done? You've in effect given them power. Why? Because you're not looking for them. And if you don't look for something, if you don't name it, you don't think it exists, you'll never find it. When in fact, we now see with the Boston bombings that terrorism is now homegrown. This is a new chapter in terrorism. This is Americans who have been radicalized either over the internet or through their, wherever they've been, through their groups, and they are now killing American innocents. And once they've crossed that threshold that it's okay to kill women and children, and maybe myself in the bargain, then it becomes easy and cheap, and you will see them much more frequently.
Well, to be clear, though, Friday night, the president did use the word terrorists. I'll quote now, we'll investigate any associations that these terrorists may have had.
True, except for the fact that they wouldn't use the word terrorist when they talked about Benghazi. They won't use that, the whole mindset of we got bin Laden, terrorism's over. It's not over. If you don't admit that it's not over, my problem is that you're not going to see it, you're not going to find it. I mean, when the older brother went to the FBI and he was interrogated, why did they let him go? Maybe it was just an innocent mistake. They didn't think there was a problem there. But we've been warned by the Russian intelligence services, watch out for this guy. And somehow he slipped through our fingers. You just wonder, is there going to be more and more of this because we refuse to look for it?
Okay, Stephen, now you reach a bit of a different conclusion on this. Because when the president used that phrase, we'll investigate any associations these terrorists may have had, you believe that is a good start. Now, did you hear that throughout the entire week last week, or was it just Friday night that this came around?
No, I think it was just Friday night, and in fact, you know, one of the reasons that I wrote my piece was there was a quote from a U.S. intelligence official in an article in the Newsweek or Daily Beast in which this official said, we've all but ruled out any connections to international terror or any idea that an al-Qaeda Central or al-Qaeda affiliate may have directed this or otherwise been involved. That's precisely what I think we need to warn against. We cannot be ruling out things. I mean, at that time, this was before we'd even really known much about these two brothers. And, of course, now it comes to our attention that the FBI had been warned by the Russians that Tamerlan Tsarnaev might well have connections to international terror. They said he was going to travel overseas and potentially meet with unspecified groups. Well, what happened? We shouldn't be ruling out things at the beginning stages of an investigation.
I think a lot of people would agree with you on that point. On the Miranda rights point, KT, this is what Speaker Boehner told us last hour now. Are you okay with him not being read his Miranda rights?
I am. At this point, I think it's perfectly fine. Again, I don't think it matters under what exception. You can always Mirandize this individual. But the important thing is to get the information now.
I have not heard a lot of people disagree with that.
Yeah, think about the opposite. What if they had read him the Miranda rights, and what if he had clammed up? Well, and what if there had been, God forbid, another attack, somehow that we could have prevented, we could have seen coming if we had questioned this guy? Just think of the conversation we'd be having if there was a second attack that we knew we could have potentially prevented, but we didn't because we let the guy clam up.
And this specific law, it was broadened just 2 years ago. And it was changed by executive order, right? I mean, that's something the president put in action in case you would have an event like this. And that you could possibly have active ongoing terror attacks or threats of terror attacks that could endanger the safety of the public.
Well, that's why I think he's done the right thing by not giving him the ability to be quiet. We need to get information out of this man. What does he know? Who does he know? How big is this net? It just, you know, Bill, use common sense. It's not as if these guys went to the internet, went to a couple of jihadist websites, decided, yikes, let's just go to Home Depot and build a bomb, and then they were able to pull off what they pulled off. There is this thread. There are more threads to this than just two radicalized young men.
And unfortunately, they were enormously successful, too. KT, thank you. Stephen Hayes, thanks to you as well. We'll catch you a bit later on Special Report. Thank you, Steve.